pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Vietnam Veterans News Podcast. News of interest about Vietnam veterans from a Vietnam veteran. Now here's your host, Mac Payne.
This is Mac Payne here with episode 1725 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran, along with none other than the notable history professor from Duquesne University up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Dr. Robert M. Rodrigues. He's going to continue describing the Nixon years in Vietnam. In this episode, he's going to be concentrating on college campus protest against the Vietnam War. He's going to spend a good deal of time on the tragic circumstances of the protest that were held at Kent State University up in Ohio. He's also going to mention another tragic incident that occurred down at Jackson State University in Mississippi. It was a terrible thing, and Dr. Bob does a very good job of explaining it and making it understandable, no matter how sad it may be. Again, as I always do when Dr. Bob is presenting on this podcast, I encourage you to devote your entire attention to what he has to say because it is so important. Keep a pen and paper nearby so you can make some notes because he gives out a wealth of information. Also, I encourage you to get rid of all the distractions where you're listening to this so you can devote your total attention to what Dr. Bob's going to be telling you. Without any further ado, let's get to it. Dr. Bob, you've got the microphone. Go for it.
Campus protests and shootings continued. The intense bombing campaigns in intervention into Laos and Cambodia in late April is going to spark major campus protests. Now, incidentally, these incursions into Cambodia and Laos were to be secret. Okay, they were, in fact, American personnel who went in there. They said, if you get killed in Cambodia, your family will not know that is where you got killed, because we are technically, by international law, not allowed to be in Cambodia. So when this eventually got out that the United States had expanded the war into these two nations of Laos and Cambodia, this is going to spark major campus protests all over America. The upshot of it all occurred in May of 1970. 4 students on the campus of Kent State University in Ohio are killed by National Guard troops there. The story really starts on the previous Friday. By the way, this was a Monday, May the 4th. There had been protests against the ROTC building. Kent State was becoming a major campus in protests. The governor of Ohio is going to send in the National Guard after all the riots that had occurred Friday night and the attempted burning of the ROTC building, and a lot of unrest in the streets, stopping cars, breaking storefront windows, etc. The National Guard came in and was a very uneasy situation between them and the troops, or the students and the troops. And some of the students began to protest. And they used, there was construction on campus. They used some rocks and pieces of metal and anything, and they were throwing them at the soldiers. The soldiers went down this embankment up, and they wheeled around and almost inexplicably fired into the students. 4 students were killed. The first one was Allison Krause. She was a protester, and I just want to add a sidebar to her. Allison Krause lived behind me. I did not know her well, but we knew that the family was there, and that was, it touched home here. Eventually, the Krause family moved away. Then there was William Schroeder. William Schroeder was an ROTC candidate. He was simply going to class, and he was hit by a stray bullet. Sandy Schurer, she was also killed, and she too was going to class in Prentice Hall, and she was hit by a stray bullet. And then there was Jeffrey Miller. Jeffrey Miller was protesting. If you've ever seen the picture, a very well-versed picture of a body and a girl over it, kneeling with one knee down, her left knee down, and her hands kind of stretched out. That's a very, very popular picture. That's Jeffrey Miller. Jeffrey Miller dead. The young lady, her name is Mary Ann Vecchio, and she's still alive. She was there. She had been a runaway. She ran away from her family in Florida and had made her way up to Kent State and just happened to be on the campus when this shooting occurred, and she, of course, was kneeling over Jeffrey's body. This had, obviously huge ramifications because it was, the killing of students. I urge you, if you can go online, there is a location map. It's outstanding, of the May 4th shooting, and it shows you where all the movements were with the National Guard and where the individuals were either wounded or, in the case of the 4 students, killed. At Kent State today, it is memorialized on campus. So if you really want to get a better understanding of that, I encourage that the viewers look for that map. There was a rock group at the time, and it was known as Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. Neil Young, he was the writer for the group, composed a song within 24 hours because he was so moved by the situation at Kent State and what had happened. I'm going to play you just a little bit of it because it's longer. It's probably familiar. I just want you to hear some of the words that are spoken. Here we go.
Soldiers and Nixon coming, we'll finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming, for dead in Ohio. Gotta get down to it, soldiers are cutting us down. Should have been done long ago. What if you knew her and found her dead on the ground? How can you run when you know? La 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 la. 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 Gotta get down to it. Soldiers are cutting us down. Should have been done long ago. What if you knew her and found her dead on the ground? How can you run when you know?
Okay, now that was an immediate response to the events that had happened at Kent State. Now, interestingly enough, 10 days later, at a African-American college, Jackson State in Mississippi, 2 students were also shot and killed for political reasons, prompting one of the mothers to cry, they are killing our babies in Vietnam and in our backyards. The 2 killed were, one was Philip Gibbs. He was a pre-law student, had an 18-year-old child, and the other was James Earl Green, who was a high school student, actually, and had been on the campus that particular day. By June the 24th, the Gulf of Tonkin resolution is rescinded. So that is now canceled. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which allowed the President of the United States to prosecute the war in Southeast Asia without the consent of Congress. So this was now canceled. And finally, by December 31st of 1970, troop strength in Vietnam were now down to 334,600 in Vietnam. Now, that's down from the 543,000 that was in April of 1969. Killed in action in 1970 was 6,083 Americans. Okay, Mac, that's the initial time, initial year, approximately year and a half of the Richard Nixon administration. When we come back, we're going to look at some of the Vietnamization strategies and how they were brought about, as well as some of the background political events that were occurring during the Richard Nixon administration. It's quite lively. Okay, see you then.
Thank you, Dr. Bob, for that outstanding description of what was going on with the campus protest during the Nixon years in the Vietnam War. The situation you described at Kent State University was especially appalling, where 4 students died. And also at Jackson State down in Mississippi, 2 students were shot down there. It was a terrible thing. Let's hope that never happens again in this country. We're looking forward to your next presentation where you get into Vietnamization and some of the political hijinks that President Nixon got involved with. Thank you again, Dr. Bob, and we look forward to your next presentation. This is Mac Payne here, closing out episode 1725 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. Thank you so much for coming to listen to these programs. You are cordially invited to return again soon and often to this podcast, the Vietnam Veteran News.
How about that? Ain't that a mess?